Okay, so I'm making this for you guys in advance of our call later tonight. But rather than go through it all with you over the Hangout, I thought it'd be much easier just to make this short little explainer that talks about the font I've been using, JCI, and how it all kind of works together and how it's worked really well for Southside. So this is a little demo of the font here, this waterfall with the different colors. And the name of the font is Sharp Sans. And using this font was not an accident. Quite a bit of thought went into this. So here's an example of how the font you use says way more about you and your brand and where you are in the world than the colors you use or your logo. So we can see here an example here in Comic Sans A. Maurice Solicitors. Now, no matter what color that business card is or what the logo is, nobody is going to take that brand seriously because it's written in this typeface. The same is true here of Jojo the Clown, like available for birthdays but done in this old Roman serif. Doesn't matter what logo he uses or the color of the business card he's going to use, no one's going to take him seriously or his business seriously because it doesn't match what he's promising. Now, if we were to do like a business 101 graph here of where your brand goes, you kind of have to figure out where your brand is between corporate and relaxed, and then sort of old and new. So some examples here. So corporate and kind of futuristic, you got Intel, very professional, big guys, very future focused. Then you have kind of equally corporate and professional in the old style. So in the top right, you got the Four Seasons, and they do kind of this royal legacy luxury brand. If you go down to the bottom half of the graph, you got relaxed future and relaxed old. So relaxed future is Apple, like very future focused, big on tech, very, very hip at the same time. You don't see it in a lot of workplaces. And then if you kind of get relaxed old, you can imagine these old kind of retro video game t-shirts or something that, some hipster would buy. So JCI is definitely above the horizontal line on this. But while we're still full of like young whiz kids, we have some really rich ties to the past. So while we're facing forward, we have this really rich history. So JCI is the latest iteration of an old future-facing organization. Branding this fully could be murder. This is the font Helvetica. That used to be what Helvetica did, was marry the past with the future, and it's a big part of why JCI made it our face for decades. When this stuff became mainstream, there weren't a lot of fonts to choose from, but Helvetica spoke to the past. You can see that the two-story lowercase a could be from a Roman script like Times New Roman, but it was also very kind of modern feeling in its big round letters. It was very confident. Then, in the 1980s, Microsoft, being cheap, were launching Microsoft Windows but didn't want to pay the license fee for Helvetica. To get around this fee, they literally just broke most of the letters to the point where they were different enough to escape the license fee. It's not great. There's nothing good about this font. The letters don't flow, it doesn't speak to anything, it has no purpose. It is literally just an ugly, broken version of Helvetica. If you even look at the broken spacing between the Y and P in Egypt, you can see exactly where the failings are. Now, Helvetica is the most overused font in the world, from logos to street signs. It wasn't always that way, but it's been around since the 60s. So, it is literally impossible to brand an organization, especially a youth organization, with an oversaturated font from 60 years ago. And because Helvetica doesn't come with Windows, most people end up just using Arial, which is not great. So, I think we can and we must do better. So, what do we do? This is the challenge. We are the latest iteration of a future-facing organization of young professionals with a rich history. So, that's a tough one. If you went back to the 1960s, or even the 50s, you'd hear Frank Sinatra. If you went to the 1980s, you'd see crazy haircuts and bright colors. If you were in the 20s, you'd be moving your body to jazz and drinking gin. This is what letters looked like in the 1960s. The technology of the 1960s allowed JCI to brand globally, and it's where much of the cues for our current branding were born. The 1960s looked like this font, here in the ad for the car for the Audi. It's called Avant-Garde, and it's got big geometric shapes that were designed to be a fresh, young version of Helvetica with a little bit more style. That's what a generation looks like, and it's the period that many of our alumni grew up in. This is the same challenge that the Hillary Clinton campaign had, to look like a modern, healthy iteration of a positive movement that actually reaches back generations and still exists in living memory. but to look like the latest version of it without looking stale. So that campaign commissioned a font by a man called Lucas Sharp, which became Sharp Sans, which is the font JCI Southside uses. Until last December, the only two organisations in the world allowed to use this font that were licensed to use it were JCI Dublin Southside and the Hillary Clinton for America campaign. And that's why we use it. Its shape and its tone reach back 60 to 80 years, but it's still very much of the moment. You can see its round geometric letters are big and broad and friendly and confident and young and professional. So they also make the statement that the organization that made a leaflet or a poster out of this respected me enough to make an informed decision about the flyer they've put into my hand or the poster they've put in my window. It's also great because it comes in a lot of what we call weights. So weight is just the thickness of a font. Like you can see on the left-hand side with Arial, it mostly just comes in 2 weights. And the heavyweight is just Microsoft just drawing the lines a little bit thicker. It's not really a different weight. It's just very very lazy. And it's also kind of cheating. But Sharp Sans, you can see on the right-hand side, comes in 8 separate weights, and each is individually designed for a particular use. So the letters aren't all the same distance between them, and they're not all the same thickness. Now, it also allows for some kind of creative flexibility while keeping your public-facing side pretty consistent. As you can see here, it gives us a lot of options. So one reason it's useful to have a font with a lot of weights is when you're, as it says, when you're designing with lots of words, like a famous quote, it looks really good to use to contrast light and heavy font weights. It's about giving yourself options. Now, here's an example I was able to do very quickly. Just an example of one of the benefits that having a lot of weights has. It just gives you a lot of room for creativity. So that's a little about the history of the JCI typeface, how it came about, what's happened to it since, and if we were looking at having a beautiful, consistent, but fresh take on where we are now, this is what I'd recommend. I have some other recommendations too, but those others couldn't be classified as sexy as this one. So that's all from me, and I'll see you on the call tonight at 8.